Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are, fresh off a 57,000 euro loss for Galfond, jumping right into the action. Ace 8-4 Rainbow, Phil going to be a pretty decent favorite on this board, betting quite wide and small. Six of Diamonds going to be pretty tough for Phil to comfortably bet jam. Typically, OOP plays lots of checks here. Freak should be picking up the betting lead fairly often over on this turn. However, lots of his hands not too comfortable taking the heat, wanting to check back. We are in that reality. Should we warm up the horn? Think that's necessary, guys? Oh, going small here. Phil saying maybe he's got something like Ace-King going for thin value, although that is quite thin. However, Freak should be betting a lot of his Ace-8, Ace-6 on the turn. What up, Rixie boy? And Freak pouncing, saying, I think you're sticking your ace-ace in a bigger sizing. If you're a third pot inducing here, then you win the money. Lots of mandatory raises for Freak, like 84. That could conceivably play like this. Ari Kama asking, where is my boyfriend? Run at once. Sorry, Vision is in another tab. And Phil piles it in. Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen. Another 12.7 Jeezys of the European variety. Does Freak. Was he value raising? He hasn't snap mucked, so he's thinking about something. Is this a cooler situation? Bottom boat, top boat? Straight flushes? No, no straight flushes. Meanwhile, 3-bet pot, 9-4-3 Rainbow, Freak potting it, intending to pot call. Does Phil have a stack off hand? And Phil gets it through. If that was something like Ace-Queen value betting, maybe Ace-6, Ace-8, and then going for the 3-bet jam, that would be mightily disrespectful. And Phil, having a hand he can go with on the 9-4-3, looking like something like Jack-Jack 5-7 as bare minimum. Jack-Jack 5-7 with a backdoor flush draw, maybe. Here he's got a pair and a straight draw. However, the King-King 3, Phil's trips no good. Anyway, 3-bet from Phil, firing off. Oh my goodness, Phil stacking off Jack-8 3 two-tone, third pot into bet 3-bet. What do we got, ladies and gentlemen? It's not close to a race. Set flush draw versus pair nut flush draw, and the nut flush draw drawing it. He is bad news bears there, something like around 25% equity. How does Actionfreak compare to Venividi skill-wise? I would say they're both quite good. Veni Vidi was a little bit more aggressive in a lot of spots. Actionfreak is, I think, more consistently solid. Meanwhile, it looks like Phil took a bet check line and then verse pot on the river from Freak repots. Is he saying that he... I mean, it's just hard to know. And a royal flush from Phil. Can we get our LFGs PGs in the chat? Phil running like the sun over here in the little ways, getting the offsuit king on the river, aka Brick City, aka ship that pot over to Phil Galfond. And on Kill the Game, a royal. I've heard, I don't know if you boys and girls have heard, but people that make straight flushes, people that make royal flushes, that means they're good at poker, right? Well, Jaboy Phil over here, binking the king of clubs and getting paid, looked a little odd to bet flop, check turn, repot river. Are you betting flop with something like two pair or a set that fills up? Do you just have the queen jack of clubs? Meanwhile, Freak saying, let's go for it, potting this flop. We have never seen him pot fold on this texture before. Phil saying, I'm down to tango, stacking off, and overpair gutter against top pair open ender. Phil drilling that 7 and holding versus turn clubs. King Jack 8 rainbow. The out of position player gets to bet and barrel here with relative impunity. They just have so many good hands on this board. King of Hearts on the turn, definitely going to be favoring Phil. Let's see if he continues potentially half pot barreling. He goes for the third pot, just sticking it to the man. If you see, when called, there's about 18K in the middle and 20K behind, meaning Phil doesn't want to get all the money in. Doesn't need to. Unperturbed, unconcerned. Yeah, SPR1, who cares? You know, let's play for a little less. Meanwhile, Phil 3-bet 2-betting and getting a very scary turn for anything he bet flop with. Is it Saturday? Is today Saturday? Ladies and gentlemen, today's Saturday. That means it is Chat Pro Saturday. Anytime you think I'm saying something wrong, start your sentence with, well, actually, and you get a free pass. Well, actually, Phil's going to do quite well on this turn. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. However, he does check and call half pot over on Enter the Matrix, meaning he's got some kind of equity in that bad boy. Freak potting this river. What in the world? Check all you can eat. Wow, that's a bit of a mini cooler in itself. Dominated flush draw, straight blocker, running into a pair of 9s with the nut, with the second nut flush draw. Nope, 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 nope. Meanwhile, 3-bet pot, queen at 6 2-tone, going to favor Phil a good deal. Should see a bunch of raises here. He's tanking, maybe thinking about it. Meanwhile, over on Kill the Game, repping a wheel. Just a little single raise pot action. Well, Freak bet pretty large for the texture, all things considered. This is definitely, at least from my intuition, not standard. Phil perhaps attacking a sizing that is a little too large for normal. Sometimes players will see stuff that's a little out of line and pounce on it. This offsuit 3 over on Matrix. Yeah, let's get some table names, guys. I liked where your head was at with that Rocky thing or whatever, but no one getting the names to stick. I'm not too picky. You guys are just throwing out some below average names. Milky Way and Mars. Mars and Venus. If my co-commentator was a female, Mars and Venus would be decent. Anyway, Phil checking back, potentially drilling this ace of diamonds. Going to favor Phil a good deal, I believe. Sassy and classy, Marnie, you got it. Can we get sassy on the left? Oh, you know what? Let's do it. Let's do it alphabetically. Classy on the left, sassy on the right. Meanwhile, on Kill the Game, after Phil pots this turn, the river pairs the board and brings in spades. Phil should be crying right now. Freak's ace advantage going to be letting him bomb this river, and Phil, representing the 3-4, is going to be all out. And top set, flush draw blocker. Oh, you hate to see it. Phil check raise piling with the dominated flush draw, rivering the flush, and Freak having the discipline to check back. No good for Phil. 25,000 euros being shipped the other way. I can't imitate Jungle's voice, I'm sorry. I don't want to be disrespectful at that point. My voices are not good. Does Phil attack this flop bet? 10-8-7 rainbow, very special texture. Freak really struggling to continue versus a raise in this spot. Phil deciding just to smooth call. What was that guy? Was his name Gavin? Gavin Smith. Who's the guy that died that said he'd flat like the 4-5 suited, the same as he'd flat his king to keep his opponents, unaware of where he's at. Gavin Smith indeed. Phil hitting him with a smooth call. Meanwhile, Freak piling, I don't know about this one. I really don't. This looks like some kind of hand that just picked up a draw. Maybe ace, jack, jack, nut clubs, something like that. I don't really believe this to be the jack nine. Let's see what Phil says. Once he just peels the third pot instead of raising, he's got a couple traps. Yeah, he'll flat some jack nine for sure. And he says, oh, you stepped into it, activated my trap card. Here we have straight over straight, jack nine over 69. Phil having some backup there with gutter flush draw. No good. Freak getting the clean double-double. Phil only up about 45K if I had to estimate now. 40, 45K. Wow. So Phil opens, checks back, and then verse a very aggressive turn stab where when Freak pots here, he can be throwing in some hands that have pretty low equity, like the random King Jack 9, that kind of thing. Blocking a lot of the ace-x with good kickers that check back and having a gutter, put it in the max sizing. And Phil saying, well, I've got more strong hands here than you do, so I'm going to raise despite checking back flop. Over on Classy, Phil loading the gun. And Phil checks back ace queen. What? Freak having the Broadway rap, 9 outs to El Dorado. But for right now, we've got a modern 2020 heads-up PLO challenge at 150, 300 euros between the Greek Actionfreak and our hero, Phil the Falcon Galfond. 3-bet pot over on Sassy. Half pot sizing from Freak. Okay, I can get behind this. I dig it. Vision has a propensity to recommend half pot in 3-bet pots on like Queen Jack X, King 10X. It likes a lot of half pots on these boards. Freak has been in the solver streets, throwing it out here on this 3 of spades turn, bringing in even more draws if that was possible. This went from wet, went from aggressively moist to very, very wet. Does he pile for pot here? We should be seeing it. Anything besides that would be surprising. Here it is. What you got, Phil? Are you protecting with something like the King Dewey? Something like the King Deuce 4-5 would be a pretty premium protect here for Phil. Meanwhile, all of his 1 pairs struggling to get to showdown. However, if he calls, SPR is going to be right around 1, and he gets to realize a large amount of his equity in the call line, perhaps thinking, if I call, I can represent some rivers that I brick when Freak checks. For instance, every spade, every club, every ace, 4, 5, 6, going to be a scary card for Freak. Most of his top 2s, most of his top sets, going to be a little bit worried. Huge river over here for Freak. He's going to be bet jamming a ton of clubs. He says, nope, I'm either trapping or I had like the King 10. Phil, in the flow of poker, somewhat obligated to stick the chips in here. This is the kind of spot where just from the line, from the ranges, for how they're being played, for how you expect that Freak's got a value jamming range on the river with his clubs, Phil should be sticking the chips in here. Instead, he has restraint with the King 3 saying, I've got enough showdown value, and loses to the deuce of Freak. Am I seeing that right? Oh my goodness. Got a fresh stacks, maybe? Looks like a couple of 30K stacks over here. Maybe over on Sassy, a version stack. Looks like they already broke ground over on Classy. I know, Curtin. I'm just joking around. Check raise for pot on this turn spot. Don't really believe this. Looks like a big draw. Maybe having Runchuks in the booth. You never know. We'll find out. Honestly, this offsuit 8 looks like a huge river for Phil. Maybe I'm just a spot, but I'd be surprised to see Phil going too wide for his value range in this spot and having instead a bunch of big draws, most of which smash this offsuit 8. So I'd expect Phil to continue here. If he checks, it leans him much more towards something like 7-7, ace queen, that kind of thing. Nope, he goes for it. My thoughts in the right neck of the woods. Does Freak call him down? You'd be hard-pressed to find some hands that are like pair plus draw that check back flop to bet call pot on the turn. Don't really see what Freak's going to show up here with that wants to call this river bet. Ace 7-6, maybe? Who knows? Meanwhile, 3-bet pot on Classy, Freak barreling off 3rd pot on the turn. Ton of draws out there. Phil shouldn't be folding here too much. Could see the occasional raise. Nope, we get a smooth call. Freak can be going a little bit. Wow, we got some hands over here. Holy shnikes. Queen 7-3-5 calling off pot on the river. Middle 2 with a straight blocker. Meanwhile, Phil's got basically squadouche, aka dominated spade draw with gutter. Wow, what a hand. Phil going for it, mashing the check pile on the turn, and Freak looking him up with middle 2. Straight blocker, pretty useful card there. Meanwhile, Freak can be going merged on the turn over on Classy, having some sets in his betting range, especially set plus flush draw, so he does have some full houses here. Phil in the tank over on this 5 of clubs. Does he want to bet a flush here? Looks like he potted it and got a fold, question mark?
Oh, let's see this play out. A check raise.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a check raise, just a raise in a 3-bet pot.
Very, very dynamic texture. Freak going with the half pot at a little over 100 BBs. Phil raising small, perhaps trying to get a cheaper price on his bluff. Meanwhile, on such a dynamic board, it's hard to imagine anyone doing some pure bluffing. Perhaps weakest being something like nut flush draw gutter, or the occasional ace jack nine nut club, trying to get a deeper SPR on the turn for slightly more leverage. However, on this paired board, Phil raising small, you'd have to wonder, is he doing queen queen 10-10 to that sizing, something like that? Pretty hard for him to have the 10-5, might even play it as a protect. So Phil running out of boats here. Freak going to be having the equity of his range versus Phil's increase on this offsuit 5. Phil recognizing that, checks back and drills the 7 of clubs. Does Freak go for a pot sizing here to try and cooler all of Phil's check back hands that now rivered flushes, or does he play it as a trap? As verse check, Phil's going to have to value bet a decent amount of his flushes. Would you say down to the jack high clubs, Runchuks? What's the weakest flush you think Phil would bet here?
Do you know what? He needs to consider what really happened there on the flop. Because as you pointed out, he chose the small sizing for the raise. So first of all, I'm curious whether that's really just his strategy. He's always going to employ that sizing, or does he split his raising range there?
Okay,
Wow.
I understand. I
And
would imagine he does split, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we were onto something with the nut club there, nut club blocker.
Yeah, that was a good read by you, because that's basically was probably Phil's plan. He's leaving a large SPR. He allows himself, well, an easy steal on the flop, and he's definitely folding against the raise.
Yeah, a pseudo value raise there, sometimes as a bluff, sometimes as a raise, depends on the run out. This time, his top pair holding up against the nut wrap of Freak. Meanwhile, very dramatic turn card, the Nine of Spades, bringing in a couple stronger made hands, also bringing in more draws. SPR2, are we going to see a 90K pot here? We have the opportunity. Does Phil go with it? He does. Now it's all on Freak whether he wants to play for the entire biscuit. Is he going to risk it? Oh my goodness. Just call, though, is what we're going to see most of the time, right? A bunch of hands realizing equity, then playing rivers.
Yeah, he has some incentives to just call.
Yeah, if he has 58, naked 58, no spades, no clubs, you think he just puts this in?
I would assume so, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, me too.
he wouldn't want to, guess, do a lot of guessing on the rivers.
On the river, yeah. He gets to more effectively realize his equity. 58 against 58, free roll for Freak, and he drills it. Flush draw for Phil, flush draw for Freak, 2-pair redraw for Freak. Freak showing up the luckier one today.
I don't know if Richard turned into momentum believer. I definitely haven't, but momentum is clearly with Actionfreak. Yet I don't believe in momentum, so go figure. Wow, nice. Action on classy, and we're really, yeah, we're gonna see it go all in, and this one's for Phil. He ripped it in with just the nut flush draw. Not much else going on in his hand, and he was facing a set, so, really, really good run out for Phil. He wasn't doing too great on that board.
What an interesting check pile. Do you think Freak's flatting many king pre?
He's definitely doing it with some, the weaker part of the king, but yeah, I don't know if like king is something that Phil should be too worried about there. In that sense, I think like king is just calling. It's probably not incentivized to pretty much turn the hand into a bluff.
this turn killing the action a little bit. Phil deciding whether he wants to set up for stacks, although it's hardly ever that he gets called by worse when he's got Broadway and jams river. Has to be something like King, King, Jack. Playing his check back. Do you think Phil checks back Broadway very much here?
Well, he definitely does it with some, but most of it, it should just go for a bet. Just makes
What
sense
sizing?
to build the pot and try to get it in by the river.
What do you think?
Although Actionfreak just, decides that it's time to spice it up.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he could have something like Queen Jack 10-7? Nope, just the King King going for thin value. What a monster.
What was not theoretically correct? Sorry, I missed that.
If you're going to play your King King as check raise check, it's the EV you generate in that spot when you're not value cutting, I think, is offset by how much you're losing by keeping your check call range less protected.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably suboptimal, although sounds complicated.
And plus, like in general, you wouldn't really need to increase your frequency of the check raise by that much.
Right. It's a low frequency thing in the first place. You don't need to balance. I mean, you'd have to be mashing a ton of bluff combos into your check raise range to want to extend to King King. Meanwhile, 3-bet pot. Was I correct? This went check call on flop. I do believe. I mean, Phil should be checking.
Makes sense. I mean, it's definitely the type of board where Phil is gonna check a lot out of position.
Yeah, so we get the double barrel coming in from Freak, just barely setting up SPR1 on the river. Is he trying to go for all the donuts, all the chips, all the wagering discs? He's trying. Phil says, I don't believe you. Trying to click it in now. What a bizarre, strange, curious two-street check raise bluff here. Don't know what's going on.
Sizing.
Yeah, it looks out of line. Whenever I end up in these spots, they end up just having it with a capital I, capital T. Freak agrees.
1,200 or something, 1,100. I haven't played on chess.com because I forgot the password some months ago, so I haven't played there. On Lichess, it's like 1,500, but oh yeah, full bet.
Gimme.
Lichess ratings are always very different, right? They're always
correct, yeah.
sort of
inflated.
I believe not accurate, to be honest.
Yeah, I only do 1-0 and I'm around 1,400 on chess.com.
I have no idea how you can do it. Like, I literally time out like 40 to 50% of my games.
Yeah, I'm the one that flags the other person. Anyway, tiny bet from Freak. I like it on this texture. Phil has the opportunity to get some really nasty bluff raises, and if he has something like Jack 10, 9, 8, 2 backdoor flush draws, he could get a really, really cheeky check jam in here. Chooses not to.
I would prefer, though, if he just floats as he does. Well, at least he calls. We don't know whether he actually has a hand or not. It remains to be seen. But raising here is quite ambitious. I mean, pretty hard to balance. You have to protect your calling range, right? Because if you do introduce a raising range here, you're pretty much exposed on the turn.
Well, it depends on how you split it, but I agree in theory. You have some mandatory protects. You're never going to raise Queen 7, Queen Queen quads. So it really just comes down to what you do if you're Ace 7, King 7, Jack 7, 8 7. Oh boy, there it is. Channel your energy, chat. LFGPG. Typically, when we are in this section of the tree, Phil is strongly advantaged, especially when Freak doesn't snap it off. Do you expect Phil to turn something like King King Queen into a bluff here?
To be honest, I don't. I think that would not be necessary.
Yeah, would be a bit of an exploit. What about Queen Jack 9 8 2 backdoor flush draws? Mandatory?
Well, Phil is definitely capable of that. I don't know if that would be part of my game. To be honest, I'm not sure.
I'd dig it. I definitely do that. Rip that puppy in. Quads for Phil. Tapping the felt, slow playing. Check the flop. Call the small bet. Check the turn. Check back. And then give me all you can eat, the maximum. Quads for Phil Galfond. Huge pot.
Check raise on the turn on classy. But I was about to say that, you know, it's one thing when you're thinking about the hand, observing it from outside, you have more time to sort of think about it. Once you're making a decision, you very often might just make a mistake. You very often just make a bet and then you realize, oh, you know what? I shouldn't even use that sizing here. So this is bound to happen for both Phil and Actionfreak. They're bound to make inaccuracies, right? So even if they make a bet somewhere, we can't just read into it like, oh, he always does it here, because they might deviate from even what they believe to be the right play.
Wow. Do you think he would ever do this wager of something like ace, king, queen, deuce? Or is it more polar?
Ace, king, queen, deuce kind of blocks all the hands that you want to get the calls from, right?
Yeah. Three IOU, yeah, I would say up to 2.5. Being able to make around 100K a year online should still exist for the next 5 years or so, but maybe not after that. You never know. It's going to drop off pretty quick whenever it drops off, is my understanding. You can always go to your random honey patch of some bagman trying to collect your money to play on a random app with some, you know, Chinese people. That's always going to exist. But, you know, regulated online poker existing for a six-figure income. Meanwhile, Phil check jamming, saying all you can eat on 10-9-6 two-tone. Tons of draws. Phil's got plenty of major hands able to stack off. The most notorious ace, ace, queen, jack, nut flush draw, smashing Freak's range. And the stack off, nut flush draw gutter, no good against made straight wrap. GG Phil unable to hit his jack or diamond. Freak even holding a jack and a diamond. Quads this time. Queen 7-7 again. Do you ever see this small bet get messed with a lot?
Yeah, it shouldn't be. I think just calling works way better than raising here. Like if you want to try to attack these bets, I mean, the easier. Well, I shouldn't say easier, because obviously it's pretty easy to just raise and either fold or continue against, you know, whatever Actionfreak is going to be doing. But a more robust strategy is going to be just to call and try to take pots down on turn or river.
Yeah, that seems to be a consistent theme for how you approach these paired boards.
Yeah, well, at least in these 3-bet pot situations, yeah.
Yeah, although also the player pool you're playing against, likewise in this challenge, is much more accurately bet calling versus raises, whereas in pools with weaker players, they're overfolding.
That is
So
a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. And also, like, you could assume that potentially people are c-betting way too much on this type of board.
correct.
Right. And if that's the case, then raising becomes even more interesting because, well, you know, they have so much crap in their range that what are they going to do, really?
Yeah. Now imagine that it's anonymous and people are shot taking with 2 buy-ins in their balance. Wow,
Oh, look at
Phil
this.
with the 85 backdooring a straight. Freak had to have put it in there. Phil calling down. Wow. Lucky run out for Phil there. So Phil peeling flop. Pretty comfortably able to get stacks in if we see a polarizing turn bet. No dice. You think Phil's floating much here? A lot of his floats just turned straights, right?
Well, either straights or 2-pair.
Mm-hmm.
Or 1-pair as well, I suppose. But
yeah, Jack 10, true.
Yeah.
Queen 10 of a diamond, probably choosing to bet turn. 1 check 2. Do you think? It applies a lot more leverage that way.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, because we should expect Actionfreak to c-bet this flop a ton. So it just depends on whether Phil wants to be still quite open to calling on the river once he sees the line like he just saw. And another risk there is that, check raise is going to be pretty much a big theme here on the turn. So we can't just try to
Stab versus check.
overplay some of our hands. Oh, wow. He does show up with the flush.
Pretty standard half pot out of freak on this unassuming queen 6 deuce board. King of diamonds in the mix, shaking things up a little bit. Surprised not to see a barrel. Hmm. 89 against 2 pair blockers over on Classy. Where's the pot? Check back by Phil. Not very optimistic for Phil's chances when he checks back this turn. It has a very, very narrow section of King X here. Like, I don't even know. King 4, 5, 2 backdoor flush draws. King 4, 5, 7, 2 backdoor flush draws is like it. How do you show up here with King X that's not a boat? King deuce that checks back turn somehow that calls flop. King deuce 3 4 double. Like what? It's so hard. Freak betting wide here, trying to target his Queen X. The Queen X of Phil could be Ace Queen plus here for value.
Oh, what a call!
That is a call and a half. Although for price, I think it barely sneaks in. For MDF, it for sure sneaks in, no? Given how weak Phil's range is.
No, it's definitely a good call. It's not like an incredible, surprising decision. It's just, it's a good play.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
You love to see it.
Because, I mean, he correctly recognizes that, a queen doesn't matter. Like, he's not too afraid that Actionfreak is going to just be betting a queen there.
Yeah, basically just ace queen. And he blocks queen jack, so it's really just ace queen he's worried about. Phil piling it, springing the trap. Freak firing back on Sassy. You raise me on a straight board, I'll raise you on a straight board. How you like dem apples? Pretty ugly river for Phil in general. Should see some jams here. Unless Phil has, king, queen of the queen high spades. Easy game. Phil relenting over on Sassy, possibly loading the gun over on Classy.
And
if he
this
has king, queen
probably is the last hand of the day as well. Look at it.
Ooh, big drama. If he has king, queen of a spade, king or queen of spades, do you think he jams here? Jack high straight's in a pickle.
Jack high straight is in a pickle, but Jack high straight is not all that likely.
If he is raising turn as a bluff with, for instance, kings, he's probably choosing kings of spades, no?
Yeah.
Do you think he would take his king?
Although, I mean, it's not out of the question that he can just call the turn and get creative on the rivers.
Well, GG, boys. Phil ending on 130K stack. Can we get a total for how much he's roughly up? Looks like 65K as of 15 minutes ago. Probably a little more at this point. LFG, PG, GG Phil. Almost, we know for certain he won. It's a question of how much, somewhere between 50 and 100k euros.
It is 47k.
47. Ooh, too optimistic on my part. Phil ending the challenge today up about 150, 155,000 euros.